What is up, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video here on the channel. We are diving right into the 4th gen Cummins and trying to troubleshoot why the Isspro EV2 gauges are currently not getting power. Well, let me rephrase that. I've already dove into it and it was a very simple fix, to say the least. So the T-tap that I used to tap into my power source just wasn't fully seated. That was it. I thought it was odd because I was getting power on my meter when I tested the plug of, I'll call it the cigarette lighter. I was getting 12 volts with the key in the run position or in the on position, and then when I turned the key off, I wasn't getting that 12 volt reading. So that was the key on source that I knew I wanted to tap into right in the back of the dash here. So I did that. However, I didn't have it pinched down tight enough. The wire didn't fully seat in there. I guess the T-tap was just a little finicky. So what I just did was started there first. I pulled the fuse in my power wire, the inline fuse that I have in there, and I tested that with the meter, and I wasn't getting a power reading there. However, if I still tested the plug that plugs into the cigarette lighter, I was getting power. So I knew that I wasn't somewhere in that short 12-inch span of wire, the power wasn't able to connect and go through to the inline fuse. So that told me one thing, really, is that the T-tap that I used was bad or just not fully seated. So what I've done is pulled the dash off, I pulled the cigarette lighter out, gained access to the wire that I tapped into, and I'll show all this to you here in a second, and I put the meter on it. The meter wasn't reading on the little metal connection inside the T-tap, so I took a little tiny micro screwdriver and I pressed that wire down in there a little bit more, and it finally just seated itself all the way down in there. Tested the metal connection inside the T-tap again, and I had 12 volts with the key in the on position. I plugged the power wire back into the T-tap, turned the key to the run position, and wouldn't you know it, the Isspro EV2 gauges all lit up, the warning lights came on, the fuel pressure gauge started to go up, so we've got that resolved and we have power to the gauges. Now let me show you how I've got these hooked up, so if anyone else wants to hook them up to a 4th gen, you can see exactly where I've hooked these up, where I tapped in for my power. The only thing we need to do now is test our dimmer wire, make sure I'm tapped into the correct wire for that. But I'll pop the headlight switch out and I'll show you which wire I've got tapped for that as well. So first off, there's 2 T20 torque screws up here in the top of the dash. You got to lift the little rubber mat out of there, pull those torque screws, and then give this a little tug and your dash will come off. And what I did was the little cigarette auxiliary 12 volt DC port that's down here in the dash, I just pulled that out, I disconnected the plug, and when I would test the wire with the meter, hold on, let me fish it out of here. When I would test this plug with the meter, I was getting a 12 volt reading when I had the key turned on. You only have 2 wires going into this, a pink wire with a yellow tracer and then the black wire, which is your ground. So it's pretty clear to see that the pink wire with the yellow tracer is the accessory power wire. And that was the port right there that I was testing with the meter and getting my 12 volt reading. So that's where I used the T-tap and tapped into it. However, when I pinched this down with the pliers, it seated the wire down into the metal contact in there, but just didn't seat it far enough to where the contact was making contact with the actual wire once it was pressed in. So when I just pulled it apart, I unplugged this, I popped this T-tap open, and I touched the contact with my meter. Wasn't getting a reading on the contact, but I was getting a power reading again in the end of this plug. So I just took a little tiny screwdriver and pushed that wire down in there a little bit further, put the meter back on it, and boom, we had 12 volts with the key in the on position. So I plugged it in, turned the key on, and the gauges lit right up. The warning lights all came on first here, and then as you can see, the fuel pressure gauge is up at 18 psi right now. So these aren't like a mechanical gauge. When you shut the truck off, it'll go back down to 0. It will just stop where it was when you turn the truck off, and then when you turn the truck back on, it will resume and start giving you your readings again. So that's how this works, I'm pretty sure, with these electronic gauges. But anyways, that was it. That was a very simple and easy fix, and I'm quite honestly relieved now that I don't have to pull all this stuff back apart, recheck my wiring harness that I made and all that, which I was fairly confident that my wiring harness was not the issue. I mean, I I took some time on that wiring harness and I did all of my red power wires separately, then did the orange wires for the dimmer separately, and then the black for the ground separately. I soldered them all, I heat shrunk them, and then I combined them all and I heat shrunk them all together into one. So I was fairly confident that it wasn't in the wiring harness, like wires weren't making contact and touching themselves and giving me this issue. But then again, I wasn't so sure and I didn't really know, but I am relieved that I don't have to pull all this stuff back off and pull the wiring harness out to check everything over. So this pink wire with the yellow tracer is the accessory power wire, and I do believe that you can actually find that wire right down underneath the dash. If you pop this kick panel off under the steering wheel, it does run down into one of the plugs that's underneath your dash, so you could tap it down there as well. But I just fished mine over here to this little 12-volt DC accessory port. So we're gonna plug that back in, push it back in there, and then put the dash back together, and then turn these things on and see what they're doing when I turn the dimmer switch up and down. I want to make sure that the dimmer is tapped in the right wire. From everything I saw for the dimmer wire, it is an orange wire with a light gray tracer on the back of your headlight switch. There's two orange wires. One of them has like a brownish color tracer, and then the other one is like a very light gray tracer, and everyone with a 4th gen says tap the one with the gray tracer. Some people have said do the one with the brown tracer and quickly realized that that was the wrong wire and it didn't control the dimming function of the lights on the gauges. But let me button this back up real quick and then we'll test the dimming function of these Isspro EV2 gauges. Remember, just 2 T20 Torx screws right underneath this little rubber piece. But the dash is all back on there. Let me jump out of the truck here. You can see I've got the power wire hanging down. This is another ground connection right here, which I'm actually going to replug into the ground wire that runs to the gauges. Right now I've got it grounded to a wire that I just poked through up to the battery, but I want to pull this wire out. This comes from the fuse box because I was just testing different power sources, and then I'm going to pull this other red wire right here, which is a ground from the battery. Those are going to come back out, and I'm going to plug the ground back into this chassis ground that I have right up underneath the dash and run it that way. But here's the power wire coming right here. It just simply runs from the harness down the side here, cuts over, got the inline fuse, and then up to our pink with yellow tracer accessory power source on the back of that little cigarette lighter or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to flip this ground back to the chassis, zip tie this fuse up out of the way so it's not dangling down, and then go ahead and disconnect the ground under the hood and pull these wires out. And also, if you don't know, there's a little panel right here above your emergency brake release lever. You can get in there with a little screwdriver, pop that out, and then reach your hand up in behind and you can pop out the headlight switch just by pressing on the back of it. Just like that. And that's where you can see my dimmer wire. I'm actually going to separate this real quick and do the same thing that I did with the power wire. Just open that T-tap up and make sure that that wire is fully seated down in there to make sure it's got a good connection. So that's where the ground wire runs to, and I just have it clamped right here on this terminal. Just gonna loosen that up, pull this out, cut the connector off so I can pull that back through. And then in the fuse box here, we've got the other power wire run into a fuse slot. So I'm gonna pull this out, clip it off, and then stick the fuse back in there so that I can pull all that back out and not have it up here so that those red wires aren't just sticking out looking messy. Now, of course, those are two other legitimate spots that you could run your power and ground from for your Isspro gauges. That fuse number is 90/91, and it is for, I think, auxiliary ports or something, accessory port or whatever, and it does have a slot in it big enough for an ADA circuit, so you can run power from that if you chose to do so. But we're just going to leave it the way I have it so everything is in the cab and easily accessible if I need to get to it. Fuse 90 and 91 is a spare power outlet, and that is a combined fuse right here. All right, that is much better looking. So let's turn the key on real quick, test the dimmer function before I press the headlight switch back in and put this little panel back. Moment of truth with the dimmer. So our fuel pressure is reading 18 psi. That's a good thing. The lift pump is currently priming right now, even though you can't hear that Airdog whispering nice and quiet like a G5 jet. And now it's dropping because it is done with the priming process. Of course, it will go back up when we fire the truck up. But man, is that a good sight, seeing power to the gauges. I am so happy that it was just something that small and dumb to where the wire was not seated all the way in the T-tap. That is such a relief, guys. You have no idea. But let me flip the lights on real quick. Ah, yes. Our gauges are lit up with the headlights. And does the dimmer work? The dimmer appears to be working, so that is a good thing. All right, we are good. They are fully lit right now. If I turn it down, they dim down and they work in conjunction with the dash cluster here. So again, just another reason why Isspro is quite honestly the best gauge you can put in your diesel truck. Factory matched gauge faces to that of your dash cluster, and it just keeps everything looking as if it came that way when the truck left the plant after being built. Ah, damn, they look good. We can pop this back in and put our little panel back, and we are in business. That's gonna wrap up the video though, guys, so make sure you wash your hands up real good and bitch slap the hell out of that like button like it's COVID-19. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications so you don't miss any of the new 4th gen content coming your way. We got some plans for the truck over the summer you're not gonna wanna miss out on. Check out all the links below in the video description for Airdog, PPE, Isspro, everybody on board with the channel helping us out with the new 4th gen Cummins build, and I will see you guys again soon in the next video. Peace.